Fred Film Radio. I'm Matt Micucci from the 78th Venice Film Festival, and I'm very pleased to be joined by one of the great artists of our time and an award-winning filmmaker, Shirin Neshat. Thank you for being here. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
Presenting the film Land of Dreams here in the Orizzonti Extra strand. Fascinating film, but the first question that I'm just inspired to ask you after watching the film is, how important would you say dreams are in your life and in your work?
Yes, it's a very good question. I've been really obsessed with dreams for the past many years in my video work and my films. And I think that, dreams are something quite universal, and dreams are often a manifestation of our fears. And our fears as human beings are very common. Whether you're Iranian, you're Italian, you're American, it's a projection of events that takes place around us, and these days I think they're quite global. The fear of displacement, disease, violence, abandonment, all of those that haunt me as an Iranian. And I found that for my first film made in America as an immigrant, it was very interesting to go after Americans' dreams and nightmares, and to understand what are Americans dreaming about and what are they worried about, what are their fears. And I think that is a really good time to ask those questions in American society.
Sure, yeah. And did you do any researching on that and finding out what Americans were actually dreaming?
Well, I actually did a whole series of work as an artist, as a photographer and video. I went to New Mexico, just like the character in the film. I went door to door to people's homes to take their photographs, but also many people came for me to take their pictures, but I also asked them if they could share me their latest dream.
Right.
So that was a very big conceptual part of the project, that not only I would photograph those people, because the film is very much based on me as a photographer, as an Iranian in exile. So I visited many, many Americans, from Native Americans, African Americans, Hispanic immigrants, Anglos, white, poor, rich, functional, dysfunctional, young, old, men and women, and basically asked them if they could possibly remember their last dream. And then I wrote those on their photographs, in their translation. So it became a very immersive project.
Yeah, that is actually an important part of the film. Another important part, I guess, is kind of a more dystopian or sinister side, where essentially the reason for taking these photographs and finding out about all of these people's dreams is a survey conducted by this security agency. Is there any particular source of inspiration for this side of the story?
Yes, I mean, the film is a political satire. It's almost surrealistic, and it takes place in the near future. But I think that these days, the governments have become a sort of a political theater. The way in which we see in America with Trump, or in Iran with Khomeini, the way in which the governments conduct themselves, it's absurd, extreme absurdity. And it wouldn't be so, out of our imagination if the government one day wanted to intrude to people's subconscious, to sell them things or to understand what is their fears. One of the other elements that we cared a lot about is this convergence of corporations into the government agencies. So the Census Bureau here is a bit like the Twitter and Facebook mixed with the American government, in a way that they become, very intrusive in people's private lives, like social media is.
It's very odd times that we're living in, right?
Absolutely, and I think that this film is sort of foreseeing what is to come, which is not great.
So in this film and in your previous works, you've often examined positions that are sort of polar opposites or perhaps very different. Do you feel like it's part of an artist's duty to try and stand somewhere in the middle, or just try and see things from the outside looking in, or do you go for a more personal approach?
Well, with this film, there's this binary, idea of pursuing this single woman's trajectory as an Iranian woman whose father was executed in Iran, who's haunted with her own fears and is obsessed with other people's fears, and yet also pursuing a sort of a study of American culture. This is very important sort of dynamic that I thought it was really important. So a single individual, emotional and political lives versus, a collective society of America. But the other thing is, I think the film is extremely emotional and visual and funny and entertaining at the same time. Is highly politically charged. And I think to me this is what my artwork has been about, how to be meaningful and layered with ideas and politically charged, yet appeal to the audience with their emotions and really their visual and sonic experience.
Unfortunately, this will have to be the final question, but I'm really enjoying the conversation. It's absolutely fascinating. But I just can't help asking you, especially considering, I believe you said this is your first American production. So did you, because the location was fascinating for one reason, visually striking, but also it seems to kind of be sort of, it's very American, but at the same time it also recalls a lot of what we see of Iran in movies. Was this an intentional choice?
Absolutely. We traveled all across America and we were very carefully looking for a landscape that at once looked like a typical Southwest American desert, landscape with all of its iconic signature. Yet there were moments that we could have the audience think, wait, is this Iran? Because the desert is where we grew up with. And so there was this intention always to look for the desert landscape in America, but yet really pay tribute to the nature of Southwest culture in America.
Well, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Wonderful questions.
I remind our listeners the film is called Land of Dreams and that this is Fred Film Radio, the Festival Insider.